Let me be clear. I am not one for conspiracy theories. Don't get me wrong, I find them entertaining, and I'm often amused when someone shares such a theory, convinced that it's authentic, when anyone with half a brain can clearly see that it isn't. But I don't believe there are little green men on ice at the Roswell facility in New Mexico. I don't believe there's a prehistoric dinosaur lurking in the depths of Loch Ness, nor is there a giant half man, half ape roaming the American wilderness. Furthermore, I do not believe that there is a secret cabal of lizard people controlling the global economy. But with all that being said, let's imagine, just for fun, just amongst us, that we in the demolition and construction industry were to get together and amongst ourselves figure out how to control the industry for our own good, to skew it in a direction favourable to us, to stack the odds in favour of the few rather than the many. How would you go about that? Well, if it was me, I'd start by gathering some like minded individuals who shared my desire for power and wealth. There might be a bit of resistance at first, accusations of collusion and monopolisation, but you could spin it as the industry unifying for the greater good. Having assembled that group, what would I do next? Well, perhaps I'd start to compile a set of rules and regulations that would be onerous to smaller companies. Perhaps compliance with those regulations would be difficult or expensive or both. And when those smaller companies couldn't or wouldn't comply, perhaps I'd start buying up the better ones. And maybe I'd allow the lesser ones to wither and die. Again, it would require some careful marketing, but who's going to complain when the stated aim of your new organisation is to raise standards? Now, some smaller and specialist contractors might have a strong local and loyal base. They might survive the initial regulation purge. So, how do you skew and manipulate the market just a little bit further? Make their lives just a little bit more uncomfortable? Well, what if you and your cohort got together to create some new training standards? Maybe you'd back those standards with a competence card scheme, a scheme in which the cards required regular and expensive replacement. And maybe every once in a while you'd shift the goalposts, make the training standards just a little less attainable, a little more expensive to accomplish and maintain. But hey, you're providing training. Who could possibly object to that? As a smart, power hungry businessman, I'd be aware that staff can be deeply problematic. They want holidays, sick pay, maternity and paternity leave. Some even require healthcare. And if those staff are a problem when times are good, they're an even bigger problem when workloads take a dive. Nobody needs the hassle or the cost of redundancy payments, do they? So, how about offloading all those staff? Banish them into self employment so they can be picked up and put down at will. No sick pay, no health cover, and no pesky redundancy payments when the market goes tits up. Of course, that would take away their job security, could quite possibly have a negative impact on their mental health, for example. But getting them off the books makes the bottom line look better. It protects you from market fluctuations and it negates any dealings with bothersome unions. On the face of it, this might seem like a bit of a difficult sell, particularly to the employed staff that are being pushed out the door. But you could remind them of all the freedom they will enjoy once they're no longer trapped in the 9 to 5 rat race, and just gloss over the fact that their position is now, at best, tenuous. Now, what if you then worked with your clients and convinced them that the only type of contractor that was capable of achieving the standards they require were the big ones? You might suggest they instigate some form of pre-qualification, a costly and time-consuming system in which contractors must commit potentially hundreds of man-hours merely to be admitted onto a tender list or framework. Maybe you'd recommend environmental, safety, and employment standards that only the industry elite could conceivably provide. And maybe you'd also suggest that your clients insist upon working only with contractors with massive financial clout, with industry accreditations held by only a handful of firms, and with insurance up the wazoo. What client wouldn't want to be associated with the cream of the industry? And then imagine how you and your secret cohort might react if, say, the government were to propose legislative changes that might prove expensive. Maybe they're planning to hike the price of waste disposal or landfill, or maybe they're threatening to remove the subsidy on red diesel. Now, you and your industry elite pride yourselves on having the ear of government, so you could potentially lean on a few ministers to get them to think again. Together with your co conspirators, you also have enormous financial clout. Altogether, you account for a nice big chunk of the nation's GDP. If the government refuses to play ball, you might threaten them, bend them to your will. Alternatively, you could just sit on your hands. You could stand idly by while the cost of doing business takes a sharp upward turn. Yeah, that price hike might sting you for a bit, but would also remove a few more of your competitors. Tidy up the marketplace just a little bit more. And then, when you've done all of this, when you've manipulated, bent, and twisted the market and shaped it to your will, you will sit atop an industry where only the massive survive, where all the biggest construction, civil engineering, and infrastructure projects are shared amongst a relatively small handful of firms. And you'll be doing all of that in the second most expensive construction sector in the entire world. But as I said at the outset, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. None of that could happen in the real world, could it?